Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Commotion, the podcast where we talk about flesh and blood in many ways, shapes, and forms. This is going to be the last episode of what I call the beginner series for both me and for the new player. For me, this entire time I've been tweaking settings and finding out how to better use my recording equipment, different setups, microphone placements, all of that. I believe I have finally found the best configuration. And with the best configuration, I hope I have the best sound. With enough playing with my new fancy equipment, my recording software, my recording hardware, I purchased some new software that helps me balance out the post a little bit better. For example, I have an air conditioner on right now. I hope it's not super apparent. And I hope I'm able to control that well enough so that I can record comfortably throughout the summer months. It does get quite hot where I'm at. And to not help things, I live in a bungalow with uninsulated roofs. And it's an onslaught of heat during the summer. So with all of that out of the way, I want to welcome you again to Cast a Commotion. This is again the last back to basics for a minute, just for a minute. We'll be talking about Outsiders, launched late March of 2023. This was one of the most fun sealed environments I have ever had at first. More to talk about on that later. It's another standalone booster set, but this time, surprisingly, we got taken to the pits. I was not expecting to be taken to the pits first off. It just showed us a giant underground grinder, for lack of a better word. It's just all of the backstabbing rogues, trappers, human hunters, mercenaries, all led by Uzuri from what we can tell. I'll be reading this story and talking more about that, obviously, throughout different episodes in these podcasts in the future. But we also got to see the return of Katsu and Benji. For some reason, they're headed into this area. They're in this area, and I don't know why. But this draft set is quite amazing, and I can't wait to talk about it this time on Cast a Commotion. Outsiders. This time on the last back to basics of my beginning a podcast journey, I really hope this is the best sounding one. I really do. I have different mic placement. I'm going to have different sound settings on my recording device, different physical recording equipment as well. Everything. I think I've worked on everything and been practicing long enough that this should be the best. I'm sorry to anybody who listened to the first set of these podcasts and just thought to themselves, Jesus Christ, who taught this kid how to podcast? Pro tip, nobody. Nobody teaches anyone to podcast. You just kind of do it. So here's to hoping the sound is as good as I think it is. All right. So in Outsiders, we'll go ahead and get talking about it. Pretty average size set, 240 cards-ish, something like that. But this is the third set in Fab 2.0, where we're getting all of the Marvels, all the collectible stuff, no first and unlimited edition, just the one release. So everything's legal upon release. Not only the privileged and rich can play the new cards because they afforded the first edition stuff, but everybody has access to it. Nothing too crazy. Really small pool of returning keywords, actually. We got Battle Worn, Blade Break, Combo, Dominate, Go Again. All of those were from Welcome to Wraith. All very, very well-used abilities. We're going to see those constantly. From Arcane Rising, we saw the returning words Arcane Barrier and Opt. Okay. And then Ponder came back from Dynasty. We didn't really go over that, but just know that it's here. More excitingly, in Outsiders, we saw the return of some of our main characters, and I hope to go over some stories someday for these characters. We saw Katsu the Wanderer return with his head jab, surging strike, and harmonized Kodachi in this set. This is the one everybody has been waiting for. Arcane Rising saw the return of Azalea, Ace in the Hole, along with Ravenous Rabble and Come to Fights. Azalea has been a long-awaited champion for many, many people. There's a few players in my area, one in particular, who has played almost nothing but Azalea. Many of the characters in this game have just developed full cult followings, and that's fantastic to see that people really can relate, or in one way or the other, relate personally or in the play style with some of these characters. It just resonates with them. As I said in some of the first episodes, I really relate to that warrior archetype. I'm glad to see that Azalea fans and stans have stuck it out all the way to Outsiders, because, man, she came through in force. And not just her, all Rangers are going to benefit from this set. Returning also from the Crucible of War set is Benji the Piercing Wind. And then I got kind of upset at this reprint in Monarch. They reprinted Seek Horizons. I loved that card. I used it in my initial builds of Azalea before the set had come out. I used it in a few other builds as well. It's a very versatile card, lets you do quite a lot. Combos well with Ravenous Rabble, etc. But they downshifted it to common. And then obviously because it's a reprint, just like the other cards, Ravenous Rabble, Come to Fight, all that, it's not going to see a foil printing in this set. Everfest, not too old of a set, but already reprinted Twin Twisters. And then from Dynasty, we're reprinting the Assassin Weapon Spider's Bite. All right. The only new keywords introduced to this set were Stealth and Quiver. Super simple, which is why I love Outsiders. It's such a good set for jumping in on. This is another expansion phase for Flesh and Blood, I've noticed. Collectors came back. Big time collectors have come back to this game at this time. Lots of investment is happening across the board from old to new cards. Value is all over the place because the market's just in a giant rumble right now. With all that said, all of the excitement of a lot of players has also returned to the game. I'm hearing about people on the East Coast, friends of friends, picking up this game and just trying it with some of the Blitz decks. We've seen a few new players pop up here and there. We've heard of game stores opening around within a 2-state radius of me that have almost entirely dedicated to this game. I'm starting to see more sales on my TCG Player store, Crash Command Games. Can't see the wink and smile, but it's there. I've started to see more sales on that platform. More and more people are coming to this game. Now, it's not a lot. It is still a small game. It's not a lot, but it's more, and it's constantly more. And the reason we talk about it is because, like I said, there's only a few new keywords for this, so they didn't complicate it too much. They didn't complicate this set. It's very beginner friendly. Everything's very well laid out, and it's I would call it a low power set, but that's not a dig. It means that we're not power creeping very hard, and it means we're getting more creative with our lines of play. It's a fantastic set. So let's talk about those keywords. Stealth. It's just an ability keyword written onto the text of a card. It doesn't do anything on its own at all. It's just an identifier, right? Some cards will say, if this has stealth, if that has stealth, only do this if you have stealth. That's all this means, is that this card enables other cards, right? It's just a stealthy attack, or maybe other things in the future. But for now, it's typically found on attacks. So that's pretty easy. That's a pretty easy mechanic, and I'm glad to see that we have an easy mechanic. Quiver was the other keyword that we introduced. It's a subtype of card. It can be equipped in the weapon slot in addition to a two-handed bow. So it's one of the exceptions to the rules that you can't have a two-hander in something else. Obviously, the theme and the flavoring being that it's on your back, you're not actually wielding it as a weapon. Only one quiver can be equipped at a time, though. You know, there is a restriction, similar to offhand equipment. And quivers occupy the weapon slot. It cannot be equipped with one-handed weapons if there are only 2 weapon zones. So you can't have 2 one-handed weapons and a quiver. All right? You have to have an open slot. A quiver can be equipped by itself without a weapon, obviously, because it means it only uses the one slot. Don't know why you do that, but it's a note. The fable of this set is it's a whirlwind. We're not really sure exactly how good it is yet, but I'm starting to see it pop up in more and more lists. It's the Plague Hive. It's a gem that is only Assassin and Ranger, right? It's a legendary gem. It's a yellow pitch, which is fairly unique. And when you pitch the Plague Hive, for each opposing hero, you choose Frailty, Inertia, Blood Rot, any one of those tokens, and then you create a token under their control based on however you randomly choose it. Shuffle, roll a dice, whatever you do. The type of token that is created is random, right? You have to roll a dice or do something. You have to do something. If there's 2 or more opposing heroes, a different token may be created at random for each hero, so you roll each time or something like that. And you cannot play or defend with Plague Hive, obviously, because it doesn't have a cost or a defense property. We can get in pretty quickly to the heroes that were introduced to this set with Uzuri the Switchblade. She is an assassin and a hero, has 4 intellect like most others, 40 health, 20 health, depending on adult or young. Uzuri's a very interesting hero. She reminds me a lot of Dorinthia with her style of play. She's making you guess kind of what's going to happen next, and that's because of her ability. Once per turn attack reaction. So, she has an attack reaction on a stick. I like it. You banish a card from your hand face down. That's a part of the cost. It says once per turn attack reaction. And then the cost is banish a card from your hand face down. That's already enough of a mystery. They don't even know what you're doing yet. That's just a part of the cost. And then it says turn the card banished this way, face up. All right, that's the first part of the effect. If it's an attack action card with cost 2 or less, put target attacking card with stealth from the active chain link on the bottom of its owner's deck. Then put the banished card onto the active chain link as the attacking card. So basically, this is the old switcheroony, the old spinneroony you do on your opponent. You just absolutely take them for a ride. You've got a present and clear danger of a stealth card, which starts making them think immediately. And then you just activate this reaction and make them maybe panic react or something like that before the ability resolves. And then you might just turn up nothing or if they don't block properly, a devastating attack. She sneaks in a lot of damage and a lot of on hits. She's pretty difficult to play against, but pretty difficult to play correctly as well. Let's go over some of these notes so you can clearly understand how to play Uzuri the Switchblade. You may banish any card from your hand to pay for the activation of the ability. Does not have to be an attack action card with 2 or less cost. That's what I'm talking about. Is like you're just filtering your hand sometimes. Maybe you're just playing poker with your opponent, really trying to scare him, shake him up. She's a lot of fun. You must have an attacking card with stealth on the active chain link to activate this ability. An attack with stealth on a resolved chain link is not a valid target for this effect. What that means is basically if you're not right now at this moment attacking with a card with that word stealth on it, this can't be activated. There's no priority between turning the banished card face up and putting the stealth card on the bottom of your deck and putting the banished card on the chain link. That all resolves as part of one ability. Nobody gains priority during a resolution. So the windows for resolution are: you activate the once per turn attack reaction, Uzuri the Switchblade. You pay the cost of banishing a card from your hand face down. Now the opponent can react. This is their react window. This is their instant window. This is all they can do right here. Once the layers have been passed priority on, and both players are cool with this happening, then there's just no going back. The card's going to get tucked with stealth, and then this card's going to take its place on the combat chain link attacking. Okay. All cards currently defending on the active chain link remain on the active chain link as defending cards against the new attack. So like if you put in a bunch of defense reactions and they place a command and conquer down, they're still there. They're already defending the attack. It's too late. If the banished card is not an attack action card with 2 or less cost, it remains face up in the banish zone. That's it. You know, if you're just filtering your hand, you're just filtering your hand, and that's fine. Effects that apply to the defending cards continue to apply to those defending cards when the ability replaces the stealth card. You know, effects don't go away for the defending cards. It's just, you know, we're just changing the attack up. Effects that apply to the target card with stealth do not transfer to the card that replaces it. So, what I have seen most commonly is like if I debilitate the Uzuri and give their first attack -2, that applies to the card with stealth, not the card they replace it with. Just keep that in mind. If a layer on the stack targets the stealth card, and then the stealth card is put to the bottom of the deck, the layer will either fail to resolve, or the effect that targets the stealth card will simply fail. It doesn't transfer to the new card. It wasn't the original target. End of story. When the banished card is put onto the chain link as an attacking card, it is not considered to have been played. You don't choose targets, modes, pay on play costs, none of that. You don't trigger on play or on attack effects as you normally do when you attack or play the card. It's just attacking. There's nothing, it doesn't get those triggers. It was never there. While I say that's it for Uzuri the Switchblade, I realize that was a lot, and she has a very complicated ability that you're going to have to learn how to use well and correct. I think a lot of new players will have a lot of new fun trying to figure out how to play poker against their opponents, and obviously sucker punching people is one of the funniest things you can do in this game. We'll do Arakni, the solitary confinement. Arakni was an adult hero that was introduced in Dynasty as an assassin. That was the first taste of assassin we got. Didn't go over it because we don't go over supplementals as much. I might start doing that now that we're done with the back to basics and use those as like an advanced concepts games, because they're not meant for draft. They're not meant for the new player. They're meant to enhance the constructed gameplay. I alluded to the fact that I might start covering supplemental sets. The reason we would do that is to cover more advanced concepts for constructed play. Not the point. The point is Arakni Solitary Confinement is a young hero that was introduced to the game with 4 intellect and 19 health. That says your first attack with stealth each turn has go again. So this is how Arakni uses the stealth mechanic. Uzuri uses it to sucker punch people. Arakni uses it to continue the chain and get better stealth effects and threaten more attacks. Normally at this point in time for the back to basics, I would go over the signature weapon, but it does not appear that Uzuri the Switchblade's signature weapon has come out yet. They just have access. Uzuri and the other assassins just have a lot of access to all these other kind of weapons. It doesn't appear that they care about what weapon they use because they know how to kill you no matter where or what you're doing, right? That's kind of cool and everything, but a signature weapon is also very cool. So Uzuri doesn't have one. They have things like the Nerve Scalpel, the Orbitoclast, the Scale Peeler, and the Spider's Bites. They're all just basically one-handed daggers that attack for 2 resources with go again. They all have piercing 1. Piercing, I think we did talk about briefly, where it gives the weapon plus X if it's blocked with equipment. So in this case, most of the daggers have piercing 1. So if they're blocked with an equipment piece, they get +1 power. All of them have some kind of on hit that say like your non-attack actions defend for -1 defense, or your attack action cards have -1 defense. They all kind of open up opportunities for your attack and make it harder to defend against their actual attack. They're all just there to weaken you up a little bit. We're not going to go over the heroes like Katsu and Benji because, I mean, we've already gone over those in previous sets, and they haven't changed. They're just back in this set for flavor and for draftability. They did get a lot of cool new tools, so be sure to be on the lookout for that. Dynasty introduced a lot of Tiger Strike, or not Tiger Strikes, what are those called? Crouching Tiger tokens and all kinds of engines like that. The ninjas in Outsiders got a couple more combo lines that help you complete combo chains. So in the past, it felt very stringent to go from, head jab to open the center, whelming gust wave, right? All of those chains. A lot of the new cards out of Outsiders are very tricky. They'll be like Bonds of Ancestry, where it says, if a card with gust wave in its name was the last attack, this costs 2 less to play. It doesn't care that if it was whelming gust wave. It just cares if it has the word gust wave in it. And then there's other cards like Be Like Water that say, when this hits, you may pay a resource. If you do, choose Head Jab, Surging Strike, or Twin Twisters. This gains the chosen name. So your attacks are mutable, you know? There's a lot, it opens up a lot of combo potential for every ninja, that's just cool. I was wondering how they were going to fix the stringent. It was kind of flavorful that they had to be strict to their martial arts, but there's going to be some martial artists who don't follow the norm, right? And it's cool that they brought that in form of, be like water, my friend. It's just a cool thing they could do. But let's get back to talking about the new heroes. The new heroes in this set include Riptide, the Lurker of the Deep. That's a ranger hero with 4 intellect. A little bit rotted away. Comes in with 38 health and 19 health for the adult and the youth. You will know why his health is like that if you look at him. His jaw's rotted away. He's been in the pits for a long time, drudging through some of the worst shit known to man. Absolute chemical warfare. It's gross looking, but he's great looking at the same time. His aesthetic is exactly right. Going over the hero of Riptide, it's whenever you play a card from your hand, you may put a card face down in your arsenal. Okay, so I messed this up a few times, but you do have to pay attention. When you play a card from hand, you may put a card from hand face down in your arsenal. So he reloads that. As a ranger, he reloads the arsenal pretty easily. You just have to have non-attack actions or other attacks you can play from hand. And then Riptide has a second ability of whenever a trap you control triggers, deal 1 damage to the attacking hero. All right. I had a lot of confusion on this card for the first 2 to 3 weeks of the sealed and draft, right? Um, I thought just playing the trap dealt the damage because there's no keyword trigger, right? But I guess what it should probably read as is uh, when a trap you control resolves, if any conditional effects have been met, deal 1 damage. Something complicated, but just if they have the word trigger, you need a keyword for trigger or something. At the same time, I was also just being dumb, right? We're all allowed to be dumb sometimes. The first effect triggers when the card is played from hand, but doesn't resolve until after the card is finished being played, right? Nobody gets priority when something's being played. I learned that the really hard way with a card called Threadbare Tunic during the releases for this set. You do not put a card in your arsenal partway through playing the card, right? You have to play the card, then the card goes to your arsenal, and then you resolve the effect of the first card, right? The first effect resolves before the first one resolves. I just said that, but just going over it to be thorough. The second effect triggers whenever a trap you control triggers. Traps trigger when they resolve and become defending, when this defends, but may also have an additional trigger condition that must be met for the trap to trigger. So basically they are saying whenever the card resolves, when this defends trigger or something like that, whenever they do something like that, that's when the second ability resolves. Even if the trap's triggered effect does not affect the game state, if the trigger is met, it has triggered. Riptide's second effect will also be triggered and cause 1 damage. Pretty sick of that word already. Both effects can trigger any number of times each turn as long as their trigger condition is met. God damn. Trigger warning, real talk. That is insane how much you have to say that word to talk about Riptide. He came in with a two-handed bow, the Barbed Castaway, that says once per turn instant, you may put an arrow card from your hand face up into your arsenal. So another way to fill that arsenal. They really are fixing that problem with Rangers. And then once per turn instant, you may turn a face down arrow in your arsenal face up if you do put an aim counter on it. So an easy way to put aim counters on stuff. The restrictions are there, right? The first instant says put an arrow card from your hand face up. The second one turns face down arrows face up. It is meant to be used in conjunction with his first ability, the put a card from your hand face down in your arsenal. So it can clunk up sometimes. Rangers can still trip, but it's interesting. If an effect allows you to activate a bow an additional time, you choose which of these abilities to activate an additional time when you activate the bow the additional time, right? You don't have to name it. If an effect allows you to activate the abilities of a bow an additional time, each ability on Barbed Castaway is able to be activated 1 additional time from like Snapshot, right? So because there are 2 individual abilities and Snapshot says you can activate the abilities of your bow, etc. Both effects of the abilities are optional. You may activate either one of those without an arrow in hand or a face down in arsenal. You can just cycle cards in your hand by paying this cost. It's kind of cool. Turning cards face up is not considered revealing the card for things like Commotion and all that other stuff we talk about. I do want to talk about one of the most interesting cards for Rangers that came out, the Trench of Sunken Treasure. It shows a pirate. I'm not the big fan of pirates, ninjas, and all that garbage, but the pirate looks pretty sick. Doesn't look very cartoony, but does have the fantasy pirate vibe. The long trench coat, Barbossa. It looks very Barbossa-y from the Disney movie. Not the point. The point is this is a chest piece with 1 defense and a once per turn instant that says put a face down card from your arsenal on the bottom of your deck. Gain a resource. I don't need to say a whole lot more. That's insane. It turns an extra card into a resource, lets you filter your arsenal if it's a trapped card that's kind of bad. It gives you the resource on demand. It's an instant. This card also has Arcane Barrier 1 and Blade Break, right? Putting the card from your arsenal on the bottom of your deck is also an instant. It's not an instant, sorry, it's a cost. So you can't respond to that. It's just you paying the cost. If you have 2 or more face down cards in your arsenal, you choose which one, right? It doesn't do all of them. You don't gain 2 resources. And then the two good quivers. I say good quivers, but the legendary majestic, I don't know. They're the more advanced quivers. One of them is the Quiver of Abyssal Depths. It says Ranger Equipment Quiver. Instant, 3 resources. Destroy the Quiver of Abyssal Depths. Shuffle up to 3 arrows with different names from your graveyard into your deck. This is not a targeted effect. You're not required to have 3 arrows with different names in your graveyard to play this. It just says you can. However, the effect is not optional. When it resolves, you have to choose 0 to 3 arrows with different names in your graveyard and shuffle them into your deck. You may choose less than the number of arrows you have with different names in your graveyard. If you have 0 arrows for the effect, you must still shuffle your deck. Kind of weird, but you have to. The next one is the Quiver of Rustling Leaves. Ranger, equipment, quiver. Instant, 3 resources. There's a theme. You reveal the top card of your deck. And if it's an arrow, you put it face up into your arsenal and destroy the Quiver of Rustling Leaves. I don't like this one as much. It's more aggressive. If the card revealed is not an arrow card, it remains on top of your deck. But the Quiver of Rustling Leaves does not get destroyed because you have to put an arrow into your arsenal face up. It says, if it's an arrow, put it face up into your arsenal and then destroy the quiver. So you can just cycle your deck like this. It's good. It's not bad because it doesn't just immediately die, and if you whiff, it's there until it hits. You can activate the Quiver of Rustling Leaves 2 or more times in a row by holding priority, even if the top card is an arrow. In this case, the resolution of the first will put the arrow face down in your arsenal and destroy the Quiver of Rustling Leaves. The second subsequent resolutions will still reveal the top card and attempt to put it in the arsenal if it's an arrow. So if you have 2 blue cards and it's your turn, obviously, you could pitch to activate the instant, and then, while not passing priority, pitch a second blue card to do it again. And if you have like Seek Horizon or something, you could just get 2 arrows out of this. Not too bad. Oh my god. I just realized that those are the only 2 new heroes in Outsiders, are Uzuri and Riptide. This episode would be really short if we ended right there, which isn't a bad thing. The Back to Basics aren't meant to be super in-depth dives, just introductions to what can be done. But we'll go ahead and talk about a few extra cards in this set that I think are worth talking about. I believe if you've been following the Back to Basics up until now, you'll find the card Mask of Many Faces very interesting. A lot of us do. I've been thinking about working it into Phi somehow, because I play a different version of Phi that goes for big combo turns. But this says it's a ninja equipment head, 1 defense with Blade Break. It says instant. For 1 resource, you destroy the Mask of Many Faces. You then name a card. The next attack action card you play this turn gains that name. You can turn that into anything you want for combos of any type, anything that requires the name of something to be the last card played. So if you name Head Jab and then play Surging Strike, it would have both names, Head Jab and Surging Strike. It gets both names. It makes your attacks so versatile and scary. You only name a card that is existent. Like, you have to name a card. It can't be just like, I name my card fuck you. Like, you can't do that. It's got to be an actual card. Other interesting cards from Ninja that were introduced in the set are like Dishonor. I believe this is very hard to pull off. I've only seen it happen once. Actually, you know what? It's happened to me. I've let this happen to me to win the game. Okay? So it has happened, but it's hard to get off in a relevant time because everyone will defend against this like their life depends on it, because it kind of does. So Dishonor is a ninja attack. That is an action, obviously. It comes in blue, costs 0, has 2 power, and 3 defense. It says combo. If Bonds of Ancestry was the last attack this combat chain, this gains +2. Then it has a second ability of, when this hits a hero, if you control Surging Strike, Descendant Gustwave, and Bonds of Ancestry, that means if all of those attacks are on the chain, doesn't matter what order they're in, just that you control them, that hero loses all abilities for the rest of the game. All right. So the only requirements here are that Bonds of Ancestry must be the last attack on the chain to get +2 power. And then Surging Strike, Descendant Gustwave, and Bonds of Ancestry do not have to be in any specific order on the combat chain to meet the condition for the on-hit. You just have to have them. When a hero loses all of their abilities, you basically treat that hero as if their text box is empty, aka a flat-out death sentence if you hit Leviah with this. Other heroes get hit really bad too. I was personally playing Dorinthia. I had to really think, am I going to 100% win the game next turn? Can I afford to lose my ability to attack with my weapon multiple times a turn? Answer was yes that time, and then I did proceed to win. That's not the point. The point is, you really have to try to not let this hit most of the time. I've already talked about a few of the Ranger equipment, but we can talk about a few Ranger cards. I kind of want to talk about the traps, right? These things are sweet. So as of Outsiders, traps no longer have to be played from your arsenal. That said, because the Crucible of War traps, which if you're new to this game, you'll go back and find those, they do say they must be played from arsenal. That text is unchanged. Okay? That text remains unchanged. You still do have to play that card from arsenal because it says it on the card. But the new traps don't. And we can go over a quick one. Buzzsaw Trap is a ranger defense reaction trap. It's blue, costs 0, and defends for 3. This is a legendary Riptide specialization. When this defends an attack with greater power than its base power, the attack can't gain power this turn. Right? So when the defense trigger it's an event-based trigger. The power of the attack is checked at the time that the card resolves and becomes the defending card. If the trigger condition is met only after this resolves, then it doesn't trigger, right? It has to have already happened. So the attack coming in at you has to already have better power, right? It says any effect that increases the power of an attack is retroactively and proactively prevented by this triggered effect. This typically makes the modified power of an attack equal to its base power. So any effect that increases the power of an attack is retroactively and proactively prevented. This attack can't gain power. It's kind of the same text as Chokeslam, but this applies to all attacks, not just cards. It says counters that increase power are also prevented by modifying the power of Buzzsaw Trap. I do believe the counters will still be there, but it can't be applied this turn. So that's pretty sweet. It's a good way to shut down a lot of those game finishers and also trigger Riptide's ability pretty easily. The other one would be another legendary Riptide specialization. Both of these can only be used one time in your deck because they're legendary cards. It's a ranger defense reaction trap. It's blue, cost 0, defense for 3. It says when this defends an attack with Go Again, the attacking hero discards their hand, then draws that many cards -1. That's pretty amazing. Not only does it help a fatigue strategy, but it also could absolutely ruin their plans. If they were setting up a big turn and really had plans for that hand, fuck that. That ain't happening now. And then even then, you're going to punish them by drawing them less cards, right? If there are fewer cards in the hero's deck than how many they would draw, they just draw all the cards. If an effect triggers when a card is discarded, it triggers for each card discarded this way, like Rhinar or something. Don't know how we would really work that into here, but it's a thing. And the very last that's it. By the way, that's a very simple trap. It's just they discard their hand and you draw that many cards -1. So I guess you would say if I discard 4, I draw 3. If I had 3, I draw 2, etc., etc., etc. The last legendary Riptide specialization is the Spike Pit Trap. Again, blue, 0 cost, 3 defense, ranger defense reaction trap, legendary Riptide specialization. It says when this defends and the attacking hero has played or activated a reaction this chain link, put the top card of their deck in the graveyard. They then lose X health, where X is the number of cards in their graveyard with that name. So it could be a good little finisher. I think this is the worst of them. It could be really good if you're counting your opponent's cards, set this up for really late game. Though unfortunately, if there is no attacking hero, like it's an ally attacking, the effects just can't trigger, right? So yeah, I do believe Spike Pit Trap is the worst of them, but, you know, experiment how you want to. The last cards I'm going to talk about are going to be the 3 big shaking up this format are the codices. They're just non-attack actions that are usable by assassins and rangers, and they have a range of abilities they do. All of them, they are all really, really good. I think I value them. Like, I know this is kind of an advanced concept, but I value them 4 to 6 cards of value you can get out of these, be it through blocks, damage, pitch, all of it is just added up. There's so much value in these cards. So we'll just start with the Codex of Bloodrot. Again, Assassin Ranger action, yellow pitch, so it's a yellow card, cost 0, defends for 2. This one says okay, moving along. It says each hero puts a card from their hand face down into their arsenal. Okay. And then you create a Ponder token under your control and a Bloodrot Pox token under each opponent's control. So really good use for the future of Ultimate Pit Fight with that wording of each opponent. But in this scenario, it just basically takes a card out of your opponent's hand, puts it into their arsenal, creates a ponder token, so you're going to guarantee yourself an arsenal, and then gives them a blood rot, so they have to think about what they put in their arsenal because they're going to need a blue to pay for the blood rot, or they're taking 2 damage. And then it has go again. Notes about this card are players can't put cards into their arsenal if they don't have any cards in their hand, or an empty arsenal zone. The effect is not optional. If a player has at least 1 card in hand and at least 1 empty arsenal zone, you have to do it. Players choose and put one of those cards in the arsenal, starting with the turn player, so that would be the person who played it, and then you go in clockwise order around the table. So just to note, that is the thing in the future. The priority player does it first, and then everyone else does it. Creating a ponder and a blood rot pox token is not dependent on the preceding effects. Nothing else has to happen. It's an independent effect. So that one's pretty easy. It puts some pretty good pressure on your opponent late game. If you have Codices of Blood Rot and you're both down to 2 or 4, this takes a card out of their hand, so your attacks can be a little bit more effective because they have less cards to defend with, and they have a Blood Rot Pox on them for their turn. The Blood Rot Pox being an aura token that says, at the end of your turn, take 2 damage or pay 3 resources, basically. It's rough. We'll just go ahead and move on to the Codex of Inertia, another Assassin Ranger action. Also yellow, also 0 cost, also 2 defense. This one says each hero puts the top card of their deck face down into their arsenal. Each hero who does discards a card. So it kind of balances out the hand to draw ratio, right? It's kind of a draw, kind of not. It's more of a filter. You know, if you can put a card in your arsenal, you discard a card. Create a ponder token under your control and an inertia token under each opponent's control. I find the inertia tokens super interesting. What those do are they're another generic token aura that says at the beginning of your end phase, destroy inertia. And then you put all cards from your hand and arsenal on the bottom of your deck. It basically robs your opponent of any momentum they're trying to get, takes away their ability to keep an arsenal or or put an arsenal down. It means they're just playing with a 4-card hand. It really evens them out and might mess up their whole strategy. That one's a really advanced play mechanic, I feel like. And then also making sure you can put a card in your arsenal from your deck. You might want opt. There's a lot of applications for this. I think it's one of the harder ones to use, so I don't think it's as widely used or as widely experimented with. Again, just like the other codex, a player can't put a card from the top of their deck if they already have a card in their arsenal or no empty arsenal zones. The effects are not optional. You have to do it if you can. You can play these cards with no cards in hand. If you're instructed to discard a card and you have no cards in hand, you just don't discard a card. Obviously, creating ponder and inertias are not dependent. They just happen. The last codex is the most exciting of them. People are freaking out about this card, and for good reason. It's devastating. Yellow pitch, 0 cost, 2 defense, Assassin Ranger action. This is the Codex of Frailty. Each hero puts an attack action card from their graveyard face down into their arsenal. Each hero that does discards a card. Okay, so this lets any of the assassins or rangers get back some of their most powerful attacks, put it into their arsenal, and then they can just discard a card. For opponents, this can be kind of scary, right? Because you might think, oh, I'm just going to go put one of my best attacks in my arsenal. Well, then you're discarding a card, and they might come in with something like a Command and Conquer, and it's mind game city. Codex of Frailty has so much unique application that you might not ever think of until it happens to you. After the effect, you create a ponder token and a frailty token for your opponents. Also, frailty just makes all of your weapons and attacks played from arsenal -1. So you're even going to come back with a worse attack, right? The primary function here, obviously, is getting a card from your graveyard into your arsenal, which means you're hunting for your huge attacks that you need to double up on. And you're getting your best attacks up to 6 times a game now, even if they're majestics or really, really hard to get attacks, or they only come in 1 pitch or whatever. This effectively makes sure you have, like, for example, we'll just say 6 Command and Conquers, 6 Enlightened Strike, right? It's crazy the value this card gives you. There's not much else, I feel like, that came out of this set. A very important piece of equipment came out for Oldhim matches called Vambraces of Determination. They are generic equipment arms and say once per turn attack reaction, the next prevention effect that prevents power damage this turn prevents 1 less of that damage. So it can punch through some Oldhim reacts, a few other prevention effects. It can punch through Dramai stuff, shenanigans constantly. Kind of hard to use correctly, but I think this has the potential, if you're looking for that long value game, to punch through like 6 damage a turn. Not a turn. Jesus Christ. Damn. No, this is like 6 damage over the course of the game. And like, if you've been paying attention to the previous episodes or even some of the first few episodes where I talk about how this is a very tightly balanced game, that'll win you a game. So I think this one is slept on. It's really cheap right now, but I think most legendaries are. I think most legendaries are slept on. You just got to play test more, but a lot of people play this game with the mindset of every other competitive card game. You know, maybe you don't have the time to test. Maybe you don't have the time to really look into things. That's fine. Play what you can and play your best. But if you are a deck builder and a brewer and you're trying to experiment with a lot of cards, don't sleep on any of those cheap legendaries. Pick them up and see what you can do with them. Other generic cards that came out of this set, I think the best one is Down and Dirty. It's a generic action attack that comes in red. It costs 2 resources and has an attack power of 6. It defends for 2. It says, while Down and Dirty is in your arsenal, you may defend with it. Not too crazy. There's nothing crazy about this card, but it's a generic 6 power popper. Post Dramai taking second in the Pro Tour. Dramai is going to become very popular. People need poppers for the Phantasm effect. Down and Dirty is one of those. Okay? This helps you break phantasms. On top of that, the next set has been shown to have Prism, another illusionist. We don't know if it's going to be the adult. I think I saw something about that. But as far as anyone else is concerned, she's around. People are preparing for her. This is a phantasm killer. It's sick. It can also be put in your arsenal, so it doesn't even affect your hand. It's very good. There's another attack that I'm not the biggest fan of, but I'm sure it's fine. Gore Belching is another generic phantasm killer. Has 7 power, costs 0 resources, and it says, when this attacks, reveal cards from the top of your deck until you reveal an action card. An attack action card. If you do, banish it, and it gets -X power, where X is the power of the card banished. Otherwise, it gets -7 power and shuffle. It's cool. Like I said, it's a phantasm popper you can throw in your deck. It's generic, but it doesn't have go again. And I don't like it. I don't like it. Don't like it. The only other card that I want to talk about is super interesting to me. It's called Amnesia. I'm always a huge fan of complicated cards because like I said earlier, sucker punching is one of the funnest things you can do in these games, and this could someday do it. It's a generic action attack. Red pitch, 2 resources, 6 power, 3 defense. This says when this hits a hero, cards and tokens they own lose and can't gain names until the start of your next turn. What the hell is that even? Okay, so obviously if you control the tokens, right, your opponents don't own it. So Frostbite tokens don't lose their name because you don't own them, you control them. Is kind of what this is saying. Effects with text that reference the card that they are on by name are unaffected. Any card text that references itself can be effectively written or read as this. So Down and Dirty could say, this is in your arsenal, you may defend with it. So it doesn't turn off effects that reference its own card. This card gives me a fucking headache. If a card or token does not have a name, it is not affected by effects that specify cards or tokens by name. I guess all I can say is cards retain all other properties, including class, talent, type, and subtypes. They just don't have a name anymore. I'm going to leave it at that, and we're going to talk about advanced attacks later, because that card is fucking crazy. I am excited that this went a little faster than normal. Outsiders was the perfect set for me to end my catch-up on the Back to Basics series of this podcast, Cast a Commotion. I'm really confident that this is going to be one of the best sounding episodes. I'm really confident in this setup. The new positioning, my new microphone technique, new equipment, new hardware, new software. I'm excited about all of it. If you are listening to this, please do tell me if you can tell the difference between this episode and others. I really am curious if this is the setup. I'm going to be using this setup for a while. So one way or the other, good or bad, this is what it's going to sound like. Because the air conditioner's on, it's getting hot, and there's no way I'm going to be able to be in this little hot box and just boil alive to record an hour or two and then edit for an hour or two or whatever. It's not feasible. I want to thank everybody for listening to this podcast again. If you are listening to this, like previously, the Patreon should be up, and any little bit could help support us if you want to get something for this game. right? Go ahead and check out my TCG Player store, Crash Command Games on TCG Player. If you hit the search function, look up that name, it'll ask, are you looking for a store? That's how you can find us. I'll also have the dedicated pro website for that store down in the description below. As always, if you're trying to pick up that Discord invite, hang out with us, play some games, I've got servers dedicated for hosting. Go ahead and check out that Patreon, get that link, get that invite. And other than that, this has been Outsiders, back to basics. Thanks again, everybody. Thanks for chipping in, deck heads. This one's 0.